we combine writing applications and training completely for free because we are a small business development center. The SBIR is small business, and we are one of 13 designated innovation hubs in the state of California. That's the I in SBIR. And then you get to research, which is the R, and that's where UCSD comes in. So it's a great partnership. Really excited about our program. Please sign the attendance form so we can tell the government that their tax dollars are being used well. This is one of my favorite things is in an age of disappearing federal grants, being able to still apply and receive SBIR awards is really important for innovation. And who's driving? Me? Stephen, are you driving? Do you have the? So we have a great panel of speakers from experts in the field. Do you have the clicker or? Okay, you are the clicker. Thanks, Jacques. We're locked up. So yes, logos, USD, me, and of course, Jacques. So this is the info and advising session, which leads up to a 4-week workshop that starts next week. And I said a little bit about the Brink. You can sign up as you like. We'd love to have you as a free confidential client that allows us to give you one-on-one advising as well as participate in all the workshops. We do not just SBIR, we do lean entrepreneurship sprints. We do all kinds of venture capital. We do all kinds of one-on-one advising. And imagine if you could have this as your advising team on your slide, on your pitch deck. We have 20 amazing advisors with deep tech expertise, PhDs, engineers, attorneys, venture capitalists, angel investors, people who have, and most importantly, founders who have built companies and sold them and have sat in your entrepreneurial shoes. So take advantage of the incredible resources we have. We're here to help you on your journey. Like I said, lots of different programs we offer for free. The SBIR writing workshop is the one we're talking about right now. Next month, we'll be launching the Lean Essentials Sprint, which is an 8-week intensive entrepreneurial sprint where you start with your idea and end up pitching in front of real investors. We have legal office hours. The San Diego Angel Conference is coming up. We're doing pitch prep for that right now. There's an event this evening at USD in person. We have free pizza and 2 amazing speakers. Come on by. And then Digging for Fire is a very special event. Jonathan Irwin, who's here with us, runs that connects investors with entrepreneurs who are actively raising funds. So for the reason we're here today is the SBIR writing workshop. Please, if you haven't registered already, you can take a picture here and get into the session. 90-minute sessions, they're all on Zoom, super flexible, from 4:30 to 6, starting on Monday and every Monday for 4. And it's a great way to really learn some of the tricks of the trade when applying to SBIR. Jonathan, please.
If you don't mind speaking here, so people online.
Excellent.
A little close to it, yeah.
I'm not giving it back, Jacques. I was saying I'm Jonathan Irwin with Brink. So I moderate this the workshop series that you see up on the screen. So this session is kind of 101, SBIR intro stuff, which is great. And then if you want to go further, that's what the next one is for. So it's free. It's 4 sessions. You can come to 1, come to 2, 3, 4. But it's a good group, and a couple of the speakers that are in this program this morning will be speaking at our next one too. But it goes into the different pieces of the application, and SBIR funding is a bit uncertain currently, but keep going. Like, applications take forever. A good submission's about 100 hours, so don't just wait until the semi-pause button gets unpaused. Anyway, that's it. Hope to see you Monday. So this Monday, the 9th is when that kicks off. You can email me. There's links all over here, but J Irwin, JIRWIN @sandiego.edu as well if you have a direct question. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, reach out to Jonathan directly if you like. Very easy to scan the barcode, get registered. You can follow us on LinkedIn so you can stay abreast of all the cool programs we have. And then I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, who's going to be Matt, right? Or no, Martin. Okay, Dr. Martin Gleason, come on up. Good to see you, Martin.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Martin Gleason. My background is in life sciences. Among the other things that I've done, I've been involved in writing a number of SBIR grants in a startup environment. Those grants have been played a critical role in the success and development of the company, both phase 1 and phase 2. So these end up being multi-million-dollar access of funding. A couple of general points I'd like to say about SBIR is SBIR is free money. There are no strings attached to it. There is no reach through for licensing or royalties. It's money that if you write your grant and you get it funded, then you're ready to go and start doing the work and being able to develop your technology and develop your company. It takes time, but I'd also like to point out that everything that you do in developing the SBIR proposal is material that you will require as part of developing your business plan, as part of being able to justify the development of your IP, thinking through what your marketing plan is going to be down the road. All of that needs to be put together in a timeline and a budget. And all of those components you will need if you are talking to an investor, if you're talking to a presentation about your technology. If you're a serious company, you have to put all of those components together. So everything you do in drafting an SBIR is actually useful activity that you need to be doing if you're serious about starting a company up. So it's not a burden, it's actually a true asset. Even if you don't get funded, it's going to create resources and utilities that you will use again and again in presentations, in communicating with people, and in being able to get support and funding. So do you have some slides, Stephen, there? I'll give a quick overview of what the program is. SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research. Do you have it, Jack? We have a couple of slides here. There we go. This was actually prepared by Matt and Hutton, who actually performs the training for the SBIR. And as we said, the training is completely free. Matt has many years of experience with this, and so he is able to guide you through what the key steps are in preparing and presenting a good proposal. But Small Business Innovation Research was established in Congress in '82. It's been around a long time, and the way it is actually funded and budgeted is it's a percentage off the top of various funding bodies. So in terms of, if you think about how robust SBIR funding is, it's taken as a little piece of all of the other funding budgets. And so it should be very robust. There are 11 agencies in all, and if next slide. Each of the agencies solicits to address specific technical needs. So each agency will have a number of solicitations, and that means that they have particular things that they say, we would love to have a technology which can achieve this or can achieve that. And so if your technology addresses that specific solicitation, then you have a perfect match and they will be interested in that. And the key with writing a good grant is being able to ensure that your technology that you're developing and the goal that you're developing for your company is aligned with a specific solicitation. And that solicitation, there could actually be multiple solicitations where this applies. So it could be that you have a technology which enables a new way to detect cancer. That could be applicable to numerous different forms of cancer. And so there will be numerous solicitations which would be receptive to a technology which can address different cancers as such. And so there are opportunities then to not only write one SBIR grant, but multiple SBIR grant proposals. And it's a little bit like fishing. The more hooks you have in the water, the more likely you're going to have success. In overall structure, there's SBIR, which is Small Business Innovation Research Grants, and then STTR, which are, they're more like a contract relationship between a research effort and a small business. But fundamentally, they both have very free terms in terms of the utility of the money that you use. You get to control it, and you do not have to give any of it back or provide equity of your company or anything else to it. I'm not going to go through these in too much detail, but simply to say that for all of the SBIR activity, as I mentioned, there are components which you will need to perform as part of your business plan, part of your marketing plan. This isn't simply research. It's, sort of, okay, what are you going to do when you succeed with your research innovation? How are you going to apply it? Who is your customer base? All of that additional downstream information, which really speaks to the question of how your innovation impacts society and has utility. Next slide. Oh, and these slides are all going to be on the website, so they're available for you to look. So in terms of the agencies, there are 11 agencies, and some of them specialize on grants, some of them specialize on contracts. Each one of them will have their own set of solicitations, things that they specifically are interested in. And there are a number of tools on the government website which allow you to do keyword searches across all of the different agencies in order to see if there is solicitation which will be relevant to your particular technology or capability that you're developing. Another thing to point out, next slide, is the actual size of the agencies, because the SBIR grants are a proportion of the overall amount of money that's given out. And so you can see USDA has got $42 million in grants, but NSF and NASA have up 100, EPA only has 5 million. So that speaks to how many SBIR grants are going to be released by each of those different granting agencies. And so Department of Defense is the largest and has a whole oodle of different solicitations. Often, certainly on the biological side, it's being able to monitor health, being able to monitor performance of the troops, keeping the troops healthy, all of that kind of thing. So there's a whole range of different groupings, and the amount of money that's available varies from department to department. So don't limit yourself simply because you have a technology which may be pertinent to environmental conditions doesn't mean that it wouldn't be relevant to the DoD. And it's a question of just looking and finding out which solicitations are relevant. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just winding it up. So questions would be for Matt and Hutton, who isn't here today. And similarly, I'm here today to answer any questions that you might have.
I just saying, just use my email address. So JIRWIN@sandiego.edu. Jonathan Irwin. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, and Bobby just reminded me, we have the full, well, not the full team, but a good portion of the Brink team in-house in person, which is very rare. So you have Jonathan Irwin, you have Bobby Edelman, Martin, and then Matt Nutton is online, and Stephen Flynn is here as well. So plenty of people to talk to about the program, and also if you have questions about anything that's not SBIR related, just general advising. So a lot of talent in the house, take advantage of it. So next up, I believe is Jason, right? Jason Pellis? Yes, excellent. Thanks for being here, Jason.
Okay, yeah, so my name is Jason Polis. I was a graduate student at UCLA. I went to undergraduate here at UCSD, and I've raised a significant amount of money via SBIRs. And what I like to do is encourage everybody to do this, okay? Because it's a great funding mechanism. Arguably, the United States government is the most innovative investor in the 20th century for sure. If anybody wants to read a book about it, there's something called The Entrepreneurial State. That's kind of boring, but it kind of gives a history about it too. So what I want to do today is talk about kind of my experience with SBIRs, how I went from becoming a graduate student to applying to SBIRs, what that then meant at the company and why I think that's good to do, and then how you kind of graduate out of SBIRs into typically VC type of money. I did do life sciences, so I was in biotech, and usually you're guaranteed lots of money to do that. So let me take you back. So I was a graduate student, and eventually you graduate, right? You know a lot about your research at that stage. Typically, professors are also looking for funding too. I think it's a great exercise to write a grant, okay? There's one thing to be inside the lab doing the technology at the bench, and there's another thing to be actually to communicate that technology in a way to other people where you get them on board. So storytelling is part of it. I'm not talking about making up fantasy stories. I'm talking about just communicating things in the right way. And as Matt was saying, these SBIRs are, they take a lot of time, but sometimes it's good to stop, write these things down, understand your roadmap, because you're going to need it. Whether you're talking to an investor or somebody else, the devil's in the details, and you need to kind of go out and test yourself on those opportunities, and checking yourself. So it does take time, but that's kind of good to hunker down for a second and write these things up. The SBIR program right now, just so everybody knows, it doesn't exist right now. So Congress has not approved the funding for it. My understanding of it is basically there's a thing between a couple of people that they don't want to continuously fund serial SBIR companies more than $75 million. And that has been put into legislation, and that's trying to work itself out. This has also been the most ineffective Congress since I think like the Civil War, because of like how many things have been passed. It will change, okay? And so they will come back. So whatever you write today, just hold on to it, because you can also think about things as from a cost reimbursement philosophy, right? You kind of can have the work somewhat done and applied. The money can comes 9 months later. So if you're a graduate student, you're like, I'm graduating tomorrow, that maybe you can go into a postdoc role. I think about a year window, okay? So I did all my stuff through NIH. The HHS part of that was big number, and I did NSF. They typically have 3 application windows. You should be applying to every single application window. Your applications can be similar, but they need to be different. The best and the worst thing that could happen to you is you get funded from 2 agencies on an identical grant, and then you have to cancel one of them. It just looks bad. You're wasting program managers' time, right? So, but as Matt was saying, if you're doing the cancer detection, you can go into breast cancer, or you can go into colon cancer, and those are different enough, right, that you can do it. But you should be at least thinking about applying to all 3 of those and hoping that you get one of them. And that's just the mentality. The way I did it, I was a graduate student, and I kind of made a deal with the professor. I was like, well, I'm going to graduate, but let's start writing grants. And then maybe I can kind of hang out and be a postdoc for a little bit, and let's try to like see if we can get these grants and start the company. Some of that money we would pump back into the lab for basic research. And then some of it you have to move out. So you can't continuously be in the lab. You have to expand out of that and making sure you're going in the direction of like real company and commercialization and hitting those and like hitting real milestones. Not just technical, you have to be doing a lot of the business too. SBIR money is great money, and it's kind of terrible money. So the terrible part of it, it takes 9 months. So you get it sometimes. You feel like, was that a good idea? I don't even remember what I wrote about the grant. It was 9 months ago. Oh my God, we got funded. Let's go do it. So that's the problem with it. It takes a long time, but it is free money. Okay. They don't take equity. And at early stage companies, when you're kind of, okay, well, the science is kind of done. So it's too late for basic research grants, but it's too early for venture capital. Venture capital does not take risks, you guys. It's like there's no man's land. And that's where the SBIRs can kick in. My first idea failed. If I had taken VC money, I would not have been able to do the second idea, and that company got acquired, okay? And that, so VC money, they will, if you get kind of one shot on goal, and mistakes usually don't lead to pivots. So I started a company doing cell-free electrophysiology, like whatever. It was a cool idea. And we raised SBIR money to do that, and it wasn't working. And it was like the amount of money we we're going to need to pump into it was like $50 million. The market size was $250 million. That math just doesn't work. Okay, like you can't. A VC is never going to do anything like that. And so we had the choice to close the company down. We had like $150,000 in the bank. We could have just taken all the money, divided it up between us, and walked away, right? And whatever. But we're not like that, and we're just like, let's pivot hard and move over there. If a VC was in the control, they would have been like, cool, it's done. Thanks, guys, for playing. And they would have wiped the thing out and be done with it, right? And so this was an opportunity to not have that and have a little bit more of kind of loosey-goosey control is what I would kind of say. Started with phase ones. They oftentimes, they will say you do not need data for phase ones. I do not believe that that is true. You need to have data, and that's where your work as a graduate student can come into play. So you can pull all the papers that you read, just convert those over, you know? And that's going to be your preliminary data. And you're getting a couple phase ones, and then you can convert up into phase twos. And that's where your commercialization plan really starts to make a difference. And that's why working with, advisors at the Brink really help, because a lot of times you're passionate about the science and like where that's going to go. And that's cool, right? That's great. But there's your business, like money has to be made, right? At some point, you have to have some sort of strategy to exit. And I worked with Brink, well, that was back, it was something different, right? I think it was something a little bit different back then. But there's groups like Connect around here too. There is a good ecosystem here in San Diego, people that want to help. That's kind of what I do now too. I find small companies, and I try to help them with strategy and things like that, because I think it's interesting. Personally, I believe that innovation is the lifeblood of the economy, and I think that's good to do. So as, if you're a professor and you're like, I'm looking at this as kind of interesting, another opportunity, it's great, do that. But also, everybody plays a role. I tell professors not to leave their job and can help students start companies, spin them out. Then you can be involved with them, and it can be, let them go and let them grow, and you can be still interactive with them. But being a professor is, if you decided to become a professor, you have that mentality of a professor. And so that's good. Stay there, do that, continue to innovate at that level. Professors can get grants for knowledge, right? The NIH just buys pure knowledge. This SBIR, you have to then talk about knowledge and money, right? There's money to be made. I think graduate students are great sources of those. They're usually energetic. They're want to do something. It's the beginning of your career. What are you going to do? Go get a job? Why not? Why not make your own job? It's kind of one mentality there. If you're a postdoc, and you're like, I've been a postdoc, and now do I want to go into academia? Do I not? You got to be writing grants, whether they're R01s or R21s, SBIRs, or another way to do grants. And it's another opportunity to find funding and to move out in a different direction. So I highly encourage that, and really graduate students too. Like, you guys have been doing cool research. You're experts in your field. What could you do with it? And how could you push that? And then you can learn something else, something totally new about the business side of it. The inability to communicate your work is basically how you would get stuck in your career later on. Okay, so these communication is extremely important. And these are ways to do this. You get feedback from the grants, you get reviewers to talk to you about stuff. You realize what you're missing. You realize that, oh my God, I said it this way. And I talk, right? And I say things, but what do people hear is not the same. And understanding that is extremely important. Being able to read a room, who are you talking to? The investors. Sometimes investors are like, I don't care about the tech. It's just a black box. I want to know numbers. I put $1 in, I'm going to get 10 out in 2 years, right? And then you have to talk to them like that. They don't understand the tech. And there's other people that are like, I understand the economics of this. I actually want to know your tech. And so there's different types of investors, and to be able to communicate with both of them is extremely important. I just don't think I'm great at it still, right? It's a constant work in progress. But I think it's a skill that when I was a graduate student, when did I graduate? I graduated in 2009. So when I was a graduate student, that wasn't a part of it. It was just tech. I think that's a missing component. And I think now people are doing it more and we're thinking about it more. And I think there's more resources to bear out there, like the Brink, that are kind of doing this, right? So it's not a big leap to go out and start companies. You guys, we can start a company this afternoon if you want to. This is the great thing about America. There's like zero red tape. Putting a bank account in, typically Chase requires you to have $2,000 in a bank account, right? To start a bank account. That was the hardest piece to do for me as a graduate student, was stitching together that money to do it. But those are not barriers of entry at all. They're extremely simple. You do not need lawyers to start companies. If you mess something up, it doesn't matter. It will cost you money later, but it's okay because if you're still successful and you're still alive at that point, typically you have money. My company got acquired. I spent probably $50,000 fixing the mistakes that I made of company formation and things like that. It was a bummer, but it doesn't matter, right, at that stage. So my always advice here is to don't think about it so much and just go do it, okay? Because indecision is like paralysis is like the worst thing that can happen to you. And if you can get these grants, it's also a thing of maybe you don't get them, but you can have now pieces of paper show I can write grants. I know how to communicate with people. People can find that valuable to do. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable to do, like, oh my gosh, I got all these things to do, and should I do this? And company formation and things like that. Like, you guys, it's super, super easy. Don't let those things be barriers to you. I think starting companies and writing grants is easier than like getting a job, right? It's like a real job. So I just want to say that, like, kind of pause here for a second, but I highly encourage people to think about it. If you guys are in this room, you're probably toying with something in your mind about it. It's a good opportunity to get a framework down, write these grants, understand the process, talk to people at the Brink or others about what you have there and slowly build it, right? And so, again, I think everybody that's kind of here is thinking about it and should kind of start to go out and just start to execute upon it. Because if you don't, it might just be an idea that you had and will go away. And this is like a great opportunity for where you guys are, like in your lives and in your careers, to kind of hit this out. So again, my name is Jason Polis. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's Jason and Poulos. Happy to chat with anybody at any time about this. I help people out. I look at their grants for them because I think it's fun. And I'm happy to be a resource. For me, I like thinking about the San Diego community and like building that through innovation. And you guys are a part of that. Professors are a part of that. The licensing teams here are part of that. The Brink's a part of that. And at the end of that is like the VCs, okay? The VCs are at the very end of that innovation life cycle. And so I think, right, you got to get through that. And then you get VC money. And then you're a company and paying hopefully lots of taxes and things like that, right? So anyway, so I'll be around, but anyways, have my information, and happy to chat with you guys, but I encourage you to go out and do it, because you guys are how the economy exists, basically, through innovation. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
mentioned that you go back and learning things from your publication. So how important it is without unpublished, but as your preliminary data for the application?
I think, okay, so unpublished work is fine. If you have it, it's okay, but you don't really need, you don't need it. Those are what you might going to do, right? If I'm gonna try to do something, maybe it's unpublished. Yeah, Jonathan? Oh, so the question is, about preliminary data and SBIRs, and do you need like unpublished new, quote unquote, new data that's kind of, you know about it, the experiments are done, but it's secret to the world? Like, you don't know, you don't need that stuff. It's more about, look, I'm an SBIR program manager, let's say. I want this to succeed, right? I want you to succeed because that makes me look good. I'm choosing good companies, right? So they want you to work. So what's going to convince me that you're going to get this to work? That you have some sort of preliminary data, maybe you've been in a lab, you understand how to run the experiments, you're an expert in the field. Like, I bet this person will be able to do it rather than somebody else. So you need to have that track record. So doing it with like third-party data that you've never been involved with, that's sometimes tougher, you know, because they're just like, yeah, these people pulled it out of a paper. But if it's like, no, this was my work and I did it, then that starts to make sense. So when I first started my SBIRs, all the data we had in there was from papers that I had published. And they're like, oh, and then we're like, we're gonna just do, you guys, small steps. If you think you can do the work in 3 months, that's a quality phase 1 SBIR. You're experts in the field. The reality is it's gonna take you a little bit longer because stuff's gonna come up, but that's the level of like complication that goes on these things. And that's usually a paper. So you do 3 papers. I don't know, I don't know how, we were kind of like, you had to file 3 papers and you graduated, right? It was kind of the name of the game, 3 first authors. It's different places, right? It depends on how impactful they are. But whatever that last one was, what is that next step, right? And that's what you do. You do not need then kind of like what is going to happen data. That's what I did. Then that failed. My company failed on that side. So what did I do on the pivot? We took a little bit of money, so you get 7%. This is great. SBIR gives you money, and then they give you money to take their money, right? So you have $100,000, let's say. They will give you a 7% fee to do whatever you want with. So that's $7,000. $1 million, $70,000. Now, so $70,000, that's when you can be like, what am I going to do next? This isn't working. And that's the money you pumped in. That's what got us the preliminary data now, because we were outside of the university then. And that's how, and then you got that, and then boom, that's what we're running. And then, and so if you guys look at SBIR and you like find my name, you can see what we were doing. It's like lipid bilayer, synthetic biology, it's just like a total morph. And again, I go back to the VCs, they wouldn't let that do that. So no, you don't need stuff like that, but you need to have like, I touched this before. And that's my opinion. If anybody knows someone that was able to do it without that, that's awesome. But I've never been able to do it without preliminary data.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So of course, we're in San Diego. We love San Diego. Can you speak a little bit to the environment, like San Diego versus San Francisco? I mean, that's your, like SF it is what it is, right? So how do you view that? And then like with that, as far as environment goes, university affiliated versus non-university affiliated. Of course, we're here, great opportunities, great stepping stones, pros, cons, like how do these environmental factors set us up differently?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to be biased because I'm in San Diego. I did sell my company to group up in SF and I didn't go there. Okay. So I came out of UCLA. And there's like a no man's land for biotech. So what are we going to do? We have a choice going to San Francisco, San Diego, or Boston. All right. I would argue that San Diego is the best. Okay. It's a great ecosystem, right? There's lab space available. Things are kind of coming up and going down. Companies going out of business and everything. So there's a lot of flex around there. There's a lot of human capital around here too. I hate talking about people that way, but it's true. There's expertise down here. The Bay Area is like that too, right? They do have but I think I like the San Diego ecosystem a little bit better. I feel like it's a little bit more longer term thinking, but maybe I'm biased too. So I don't want to too much of my biases. And then, so being university affiliated is good. So I'll get to your question in a second. But they got to trust you. Who can do the work? If you're just some random dude, from nowhere, I don't know, but if you're like, I was in this person's lab, pedigree can count, you guys. I know we're not supposed to, and it's supposed to be a meritocracy. The SBIRs generally are, but still, how do I trust that you know how to do it? Oh yeah, there's this lab, they published a couple papers, that's what's of interest, right? Do you believe that this person can do the work? Starting companies, 3 things. I was just talking to someone about this, and I know I went over my time, and I'll stop, but like, you need an idea, technology, I'll call it. You need people, and you need money. And that's it. And the people are there that the money believes can execute on the technology. Typically, if you come out of a university or been, that will give you credibility. That's all it is. Do you have a question? Okay. Okay. Sure.
You mentioned that you favored San Diego versus San Francisco, but you did not. I'm from San Francisco. Like I flew in here to San Diego specifically to see how SBIR works.
Mhm.
I want to ask you this question: what factors, like what variables, are you comparing? Because I find the liquidity pool in San Francisco to be ginormous, like asymmetrically ginormous compared to San Diego.
Yes. So, yeah, no, there's more investors that are kind of moving a little bit faster with money around there. The reality is, for money to come in, the location for you, San Francisco is a bus ride away, you guys. It's a Southwest flight is like $120, and you can hop up in the morning and go have meetings with people at 10 a.m. And then the last flight that leaves is usually around 8 p.m. Okay, so you can do it in a day. It really, for me, it was a lot of personal choices too. I like this area. I like the weather. I like the kind of the vibe around here. San Francisco's, I think it's just a little bit more turned up. You know, it's just like a little bit more kind of a little bit on more. But I think I think that in biotech, I think sometimes like a little bit more. They're the same thing, kind of. I mean, like from a geographical standpoint, they're not much different. And you can tap the same pools, right? I think from space-wise and people-wise, I think that's what's really important, making sure people are going to be around there. And I think San Francisco has that too, right? So then the question is kind of where do you want to be? I mean, Boston probably has the same stuff too, right? So I think you can kind of go anywhere, but I like the ecosystem in San Diego. I'm more familiar with it, right? If I spent 10 years in San Francisco, maybe I'd be saying San Francisco.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier, but there's a little bit of a misconception or a fear or a myth that professors, research, you have dedicated your career to bringing in philanthropy and using university resources and data storage and all sorts of things. Like, how can we convince our professors? I'm a grad student, so I'm kind of thinking very much along the lines. Also grateful to both institutions. I actually just graduated from USD with my master's in marine science, and I'm now a PhD student here at Scripps with UCSD. So thank you to both institutions.
Yeah, awesome.
But yeah, just curious about it.
So, I mean, talking to, so is the question is, how do we go talk to my professor about let's spin out a company and be into that? Yeah, and so sometimes so I was at UCLA, and Dino DiCarlo is now the chair of bioengineering, I think, at UCLA. When I was there, he first started as a professor. Dino is like, let's start companies, boom, boom, boom. He's super encouraging of his students to do that. Some professors are just like, companies, like, that's old news. That science old, right? Like, who cares, right? It's not interesting. But the thing is, and this becomes part of it, going to professors like, we're going to translate this out and kind of pursue it through. If they're kind of what I'll call pure science professors, I love that. And do that, continue to do that. And maybe, we could work together. Maybe we'll do an STTR later together. Maybe we'll do the SBIR. I pumped a little bit of money back into the lab I came from to do basic research, right? As part of it, right? So that can be there. Now the question is, would the professor go why don't you write an R21 versus an SBIR? And because it's kind of more an academic or something like that. And that's something Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good idea to write an R21. I mean, just writing grants is interesting too. I would try to have that conversation with them though. Be like, I'm kind of interested in this. I sat down with my professor. He had never started a company. My advisor was Jacob Schmidt at UCLA. And I, instead of taking a bunch of elective classes about some capacitors and plates moving closer together and charge and shenanigans and technology, I was like, can I go to MBA? I took classes at the business school there. And that's what you're like, this kid's interested in business and doing something different. And then hopefully the professor is interested in, I don't want to do this, but they can learn, right? So I think you have a candid conversation about it. No one's stepping on anybody's toes. So a lot of things that can happen is postdocs will spin out companies, or not companies, but become professors. And now you have a really conflict of interest because who's going to take that research out? But this is not, because you're not competing for the same dollars and you're not going to do basic science. You're going to kind of do boring stuff, right? You're going to engineer it now, right? There's science and then engineering is like actually like making it work at scale and things like that. So it's a conversation to be had with them. I think they should be open to it. If you're finding that difficult, like come talk to me, dude, and we can talk about how to approach them. But I think they should be encouraging that. They're professors, their jobs are to build you guys' career, right? That's what, in theory, this is supposed to be about. And people are different. Some people choose pure academic, some people do industry, and this is kind of like sliced down the middle, right? So I think you got to just talk to them about, hey, I'm interested in companies. Do you know anybody that started any companies in our department? Can I go talk to them? I think, isn't UCSD or Scripps now doing some sort of oceanography innovation? Yeah, startup thing. So yeah, like we should be encouraging this stuff. And I think your professor should. And if it's not, then we have to question about like, is this lab the right lab? You know, and things like that. You don't want to switch advisors, but everybody should be open to do that. So just have that conversation. But I'm down to talk with you more outside of this about kind of how to approach that and to think about it so that they're accepting. But they should be open to that stuff. Thanks, guys. Yep. Thank you. Great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions in the chat. One was, what is the size of an SBIR grant? They vary by department, but generally about $250,000, but then gets up to $2 million quite quickly, especially as you get into phase 2 or NASA or DoD sometimes. But it really depends on the department. Is that correct, Martin? Roughly. Each agency has its minimum, right?
300,000 for a phase 1, and a phase 2 goes up to 1.5 to 2 million, and north of that even.
Thank you. And there's another question about, do you need a prototype to apply for SBIR? Generally, no, but as Jason was saying, the further you are along with your data, your research, your prototyping, that de-risks the government's grant. So as Jason said, everyone wants to be successful. And keep in mind that it's from the path of an idea to an exit, whether it's an IPO or an acquisition, are many, many steps. And each step you take forward de-risks the transaction that's happening. So venture capitalists don't want to come in until you've had a proof of concept and revenue and customers and all of that. The government doesn't want to come in until they know that you're serious and that you put a lot of work into and collected the data and you've started prototyping. So the further along you are, the more likely you are to get the award. And investors, we love to see non-dilutive funding because we know that it's quite complicated to get government grants. It takes a lot of time and it shows your dedication, tenacity, and your creativity. So all along the way, these are important steps. Next up.
One more question.
One more question, yes.
Yeah, one more question from the chat. How can you effectively design customer interview questions to collect useful data when you're building your SBIR proposal? The question kind of for anybody.
Okay. Good question, because it reminds me, someone asked, do you need to be university affiliated? You do not, but if you are, it opens up other doors. And one of the other doors is the National Science Foundation I-Corps program. And that is an intensive customer discovery program where you get paid to interview potential customers and work on your business model and your business plan. So yes, customer discovery is very important, and there is a very structured National Science Foundation program that has a small grant. We do an expedited sprint that is based on that, called the Lean Essentials Sprint, that's starting in March at the Brink, 100% virtual up until demo day. So if you want to learn about how to do customer discovery, we'll be speaking about it in a couple of weeks, and then we'll be putting on the workshop in 1 month. And Jacques.
Yeah, and let me add to this. So the campus has, so we're part of the NSF I-Core program. So there are multitude campuses. We're part of the Southwest region. And IGE, which is out of Jacobs School of Engineering, has an NSF I-Core regional. If you go to the website, there's actually the next one is coming up in March, so it's still time to register. And if that one doesn't fit, there's a bunch of other ones that are offered across the network. There's one every other month. And as Benton mentioned, it's all about product market fit. So understanding, how your idea or invention could really address a particular need. And then you go through the process of doing interviewing and kind of ultimately getting some sort of a sense of what might be your beachhead market. So it's 4 weeks, usually 3 hours a night. And unfortunately, the NSF changed the rules. So the first regional one, you don't get any money anymore. But if you successfully complete 20 interviews and gone through the program, you'll be eligible to go to the national, which is $50,000. You have to do 100 interviews. So very valuable programs. And like I said, using either the NSF I-Core program that we have here or starting with the Brink and then come to us. But these are resources that are available to everyone.
Yeah, it was this time last year, you and I went through the SBIR program together. So yeah, it's UCSD is actually part of a 9-university coalition called the Desert and Pacific Communities. And most of the SBIRs are like there's one every month at one of the universities, all virtual. So you're not limited to participating anywhere. So great opportunities, and I cannot encourage that enough. And yeah, they've done it stripped down. You can do it in 4 weeks now instead of the 6 to 12 month process that was the nationals. Next up, quick one. Yes, Bobby. Yeah, okay.
So for an SBIR, it has to be a small business. Small business is defined as under 500 people. And yeah, okay. So the question was, what kind of legal entity and what restrictions are associated with what is eligible for an SBIR? And so the company has to be less than 500 people. It can be a C Corp, it can be an LLM, it can be any kind of entity, but it has to be US based, and it has to be owned in the US. So it's, those are the restrictions.
Thanks, Martin. And yeah, to speak more on that, it's a prescient question. Good timing, because next up we have Kit Ryan from the law firm Pillsbury, who's going to talk on that extensively. So Kit, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Good to hear your voice. Good to see you. We'll turn it over to you then, Kit. Cheers.
All right. I'm going to share my screen here. Let me know if everybody's able to see that clearly. Are we live?
We can see it, Kit.
Okay, great. So first of all, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Kit Ryan. I'm a corporate attorney at a major law firm called Pillsbury, not to be confused with the Doughboy. Pillsbury is a global law firm, and we have offices, I think 24 offices globally, around 800 attorneys. My specialty is M&A, venture capital, and advising startups. I was previously based in San Diego, and I was there for the last decade, and now I just recently moved or in the last year, I've moved to Northern California. And I did want to just, before I get started, touch on a question that I think somebody asked about the differences between investment funding in San Francisco versus in San Diego. And I'm also an angel investor. I represent lots of VCs. And so I have a pretty good understanding of both spaces in San Diego and in San Francisco. And the one thing I just want to add is, I will say that the total dollars is likely larger in San Francisco, but the folks in San Diego tend to be more approachable, willing to have conversations, willing to get a coffee with people who are just reaching out. And they always tend to be open to reviewing pitch decks. It's more of a collaborative environment, I would say. So if there's ever a situation where you're looking for funding, I would highly recommend just building your network, whether that's in San Diego or San Francisco. But don't be afraid to just reach out generally, or even cold call people or cold email people. And if there's ever anybody that I'm connected with on LinkedIn, or if you want somebody to look at a pitch deck, I'm always open to doing something like that. Just let me know. So what I'm going to talk about during this presentation, as it ties to SBIR, is the formation of an entity. I think somebody just answered part of the question, which is what type of entities are allowed. My understanding, and I will say I'm not an SBIR expert, but my specialty is corporate law, and so what I'm going to talk about is from a corporate law standpoint. But I do have a basic understanding of what the SBIR requirements are for specific entities. You can have any type of entity except for a sole proprietorship, and at least a majority of the company or the equity within that company needs to be owned by a U.S. citizen. Those are two of the major frameworks that we're working with. But the questions that I'm going to deal with here are the breakdown of the different types of legal structures that you can choose from, which jurisdiction you should form your entity in, and the pros and cons of both of those. I'll also touch a little bit on IP and some tax considerations as well. And so the first thing that you want to think about is, why do you even care about your legal structure or your jurisdiction of formation? And we're going to talk about that in the next slide. The main thing about forming an entity is you care about limited liability. So you're trying to protect yourself from being personally liable for the debts or the mistakes or the obligations of the actual entity that's doing business with individuals or other entities. So that's the number one thing that I care about. Then you've got management and control. Different entity structures allow for different types of control mechanisms between whether it's the stockholders or the members of an LLC that control the entity management, or it's the board of directors. That's really the two differences. Or in cases when you have a partnership, it's the partners themselves. And so really, who is actually actively controlling the company? Then it's your ability to obtain funding. Sometimes you have situations where investors will not invest in certain types of entities. That's becoming less common, but generally, still today, the Delaware C Corp is the primary funding mechanism for, or the primary company for a structure that VCs want to invest in. And so, in general, if you're choosing the type of entity structure that you want, the first question you should be asking yourself is, am I going to eventually go for institutional funding? Am I going to ask VCs, angel investors, or a private equity company to invest in my company? If the answer to that question is true, then you're more likely going to go with the Delaware C Corp versus something like the LLC or any of the other entity structures, which I'll show in the next slide. The next thing that you want to think about is incentive management. So what that means is basically, are you able to issue equity incentives to your employees? And how easily and tax efficiently can you do that? With the C corporation, it's very easy, right? It's a standard process. You're able to set aside a pool of equity and issue option grants to individuals. As opposed to the LLC, which that structure becomes more difficult and costly to set up. You can't just issue an employee equity in an LLC. There's a statutory issue with that. And then you have tax efficiencies, right? So you have different structures have different types of or are taxed differently. For example, the C corporation, you get taxed twice, right? So you have the initial tax that the C corporation pays when it generates income or loss, and then a secondary tax is paid at the individual level when a dividend is distributed, or if you're the owner and you're also an employee of a C corporation, it's also paid through your W-2. And so that generates a double layer of taxation. And so it's not, the C corporation isn't the most tax effective mechanism out there, but there are other considerations that allow for tax efficiency, which I will talk about later, called qualified small business stock, which is extremely important. For the LLC structure, though, and a lot of times the founders that are young founders that come to our firm who have started their business themselves, they will almost inevitably default to the LLC, thinking that it is a superior instrument or superior structure from a tax perspective. It is generally better from a tax perspective, especially earlier on, because you're able to offset the losses that are generated at the LLC against the income that you're generating personally. So your ordinary income that shows up on your 1040 will be offset by any loss that you generate on your 1065, which is the tax form for your LLC, if you structure it to be taxed as an LLC. The other benefit, if you're generating income for the LLC, is that the tax flows through directly to your personal income taxes. And so you're only paying a single level of taxation rather than two, as opposed to the C corporation where you have the tax that gets paid at the corporation level, and then you've got a dividend out that gets paid. So 2 layers of tax there. The downside to that beneficial structure is if you're an investor and you go and you put an investment into an LLC, and you don't make any other adjustments that are necessary to avoid this, you will be paying tax on income that's generated at the LLC level that does not provide you with an ROI. And so that's really the main reason why investors avoid the LLC structure. And that's not to say that there aren't creative strategies and common strategies also that avoid that kind of issue, or requiring the LLC to pay out the amount to the investor that offsets that taxable income that gets flows through to them. But if we're talking about like simplicity, what is the simplest structure that you could set up to set you up for SBIR funding and to set you up for funding from venture capitalists where nobody's going to have any issue with your structure? You're going to want to go with the Delaware C Corporation. This is a list of several of the entities, and I'll just kind of run through a couple here. You've got your sole proprietorship. A sole proprietorship is just an entity that you don't actually have to form formally. There's no requirement to file with the Delaware Secretary of State or California Secretary of State. Sometimes people accidentally form these. This is just a single member partnership. That's effectively what the sole proprietorship is. The limited partnership and the general partnership are very similar to the sole prop, except they have multiple members. The general partnership, there is no limited liability like you have with the limited partnership. And remember, the limited liability is one of the most important aspects of owning a business, because you want to insulate yourself from being liable for the obligations and the debts of the company. And so if your company goes under and goes through bankruptcy, you don't want yourself personally to go through that as well. And that's the whole purpose of creating these entities, other than also it allows you to obtain that SBIR funding. The next one I just want to touch on is the B Corporation. A B Corporation is also called a benefit corporation. This is not a formal entity structure. What this is, and if people are familiar with it, it's effectively a certification from B Lab, which is an organization that provides these certifications that says that they are a benefit corporation, that they provide, that they've restructured their corporation so that rather than having a fiduciary duty to your stockholders, you have a fiduciary duty, the board has a fiduciary duty to all stakeholders. And that means that everybody associated with the company, the board is going to have a fiduciary duty to benefit. That's what that B Corporation means. It's really a marketing tactic. And so if you're If you fall within a corporation that might benefit from that, it is something that you can look into getting a certification for, but just know it's really a marketing tactic. The public benefit corporation is just a nonprofit. 501c3 is a filing that needs to be done, and that really is the difference between whether something is taxed like a regular corporation or gets the beneficial tax treatment as a nonprofit. And so you can't just form a public benefit corporation. You still have to go through the filing for the 501c3 status. The next one here is the S corporation. A lot of early founders come to us with, and they've created an S corporation. What that basically is they formed a C corporation, but they're getting taxed like an LLC, taxed like a partnership. And so they get that flow through taxation. They don't have the double taxation that you have with the C Corp. The S Corporation has lots of limitations. So you can only have 100 shareholders. None of them can be entities. None of them can be foreign individuals. And so there are limiting factors to the S Corporation, and you won't see a venture capitalist invest in that kind of entity. And so, yes, you can, when you initially form your company, create a C Corporation, get the S Corp election, and benefit from that structure until the time when you're ready to get venture capital funding. That is a viable strategy. The last two here, which are the most common and which is why they're bold, is the LLC and the C Corporation. These are the two that I kind of alluded to earlier that are the most common. These are the ones that people are deciding between. What I would argue is the deciding factor is whether you're going to go out and get institutional funding, like I said before. And if you are, then you should default to the C Corporation. If you're not, you can go with the LLC. It's up to your, tax preference and other things as well. The last thing I'll mention too is about ease of formation. So one of the considerations is, okay, well, how costly is this going to be to set up my structure? I really just want to get my company going. I want to focus on operations, and that all completely makes sense to me. The LLC is much easier to form than the C Corporation in that all it takes is a single document to file with either California or Delaware. The downside to that ease of formation is that you don't have the formal structure in place. You can form a single member LLC like within a minute almost, maybe 10 minutes it would take you. But that you wouldn't have the other documentation in place to show who actually owns the LLC. What is the control structure? All these things that you would have in the C Corp documentation and also things you would have in your operating agreement for your LLC. So what I would encourage you is if you decide to go with the LLC, you should sit down and really think about what kind of control mechanisms you want in place, voting structures you want in place to make sure that everybody who's joining your company, the whole founding team, understands where they stand with respect to all of that control and management for the LLC. And a lot of times people they're focused on other things. They just decide to form the entity and move on without really thinking through those kind of mechanics, which is what you are forced to do with the C Corporation. These are the documents that are required to form a C Corporation. I won't go through each one of these because they're very cookie cutter. The one thing I want to point out, though, is the founder stock purchase agreement. For anybody who is going to form an entity or just start a company with anybody else, everybody who's on the founding team should execute one of these founder stock purchase agreements and be subject to various requirements, right? The most important of which is the vesting requirement. So you don't want to be in a scenario where you just started a company with your best friend and then a couple weeks later he decides this really isn't for him, but he still owns 50% of the company. You'd be surprised how often that happens, and people just don't think about it because they're so focused on growing the business. It's really basic stuff, like just make sure everybody is subject to a standard vesting clause. The most standard vesting is there's a 12-month cliff, which means if the person leaves before that 12-month mark, they lose all of their stock. And then once they've met that cliff, they've vested 25% of it. And then the rest of the 75% vests over 36 months. So you have to stay with the company for 4 years in order to have fully vested 100% of the stock that you received. And that's just a protective mechanism, both for the other founders and also the company that issues the stock, right? Because you don't want people who are not vested, pun intended, have a vested interest in the company to have a large stake in the company, which comes with, control, decision-making authority. That's a scenario you don't want to be in, but a lot of people put themselves in that scenario inadvertently. The other thing to point out here is an acceleration clause. This is something that if you're starting a company with somebody, you should be thinking about, okay, well, do we want our stock to accelerate in the event of a change of control? Which just means, am I going to be paid out for all of the shares that I was promised, even if I haven't vested yet? Lots of founders, especially experienced founders, will require this, and I highly recommend that you do so as well. There's other things too, but I want to be cognizant of time here. This kind of just outlines all of the items that we talked about before, about whether to choose between your LLC and C corporation. We talked about the formation things, the management control, limitation of liability, investor's opinion, which is extremely important, and tax considerations. Now let's talk a little bit about jurisdiction, because if you're based in California, which I think everybody is, your decision on where you incorporate or where you form your LLC really comes down to California or Delaware. If you're going to go with the LLC route, I recommend just forming in California. The reason for that is because you don't have to pay, or excuse me, you don't have to file another tax return, which you would need to do if you filed in Delaware. So if you're based in California and you have California operations, you only have an obligation to file in California. If you incorporate or form your LLC in Delaware, however, then you have an obligation to file in both California and in Delaware. And so that complicates your tax return. And another common misconception that people have is if they form their entity in Nevada and Nevada has a 0% corporate income tax, then they will also not be paying income tax in Nevada because they form there. That's not how it works. You would still have an obligation to file in California, and you would still be paying tax in California. So what you did by forming in Nevada is just create another obligation for you to file somewhere else. So if you're going to go with the LLC, you're not going to get institutional funding, and you might as well just form in California. If you decide that you're going to go with institutional funding, you want to form in Delaware. The reason for that, let me go back. The reason for Delaware is because that's what investors want. The jurisprudence in Delaware has been litigated for decades now. And so there are really well-established laws and understanding of how judges will decide on certain things, particularly with respect to fiduciary duties and breaches of those duties for the board members, which is what the investors really care about. They don't want a scenario where, because they made a bad decision or the company as a whole made a bad decision, that they will be personally liable. And that's also a benefit for the founders as well, having a better understanding of when a breach of a fiduciary duty is actually going to pierce through the corporate veil and come after you individually, which all comes back to the limitation of liability that we talked about before. It's extremely important. This slide talks a little bit about the SBIR related considerations about forming an entity. The applicant has to be a for-profit US-based entity with fewer than 500 employees. We heard that earlier. A nonprofit or an unincorporated entity like the sole proprietorship will not qualify. That means that before you file your SBIR grant, you have to form your entity. The next one we talked about already, which is the control. At least 50% of the business must be owned directly or indirectly by US citizens. And no single venture capital fund or private equity firm may own more than 50% of the business. We've had scenarios where people have come to us asking for structuring suggestions to work around this 50% requirement. But it really comes down to are the individuals that own the entity over 50% of that control owned by US citizens. The next thing here, ownership. The company, not the individual founders or third party, own all of the intellectual property associated with the proposal. So I think we might have another slide on this, but IP is extremely important. So when you initially form your entity, everybody who comes on board, all of your employees, all your consultants, the entire founding team should all enter an agreement that assigns all of the IP associated with the business to the company. It's called a proprietary inventions information assignment agreement. They come in different names, but that's the one that we typically use. This is just an agreement that says, hey, anything that I touch when I'm working at the company, anything related to the company, or anything that I developed for the company prior to the company being formed, all of that is going to be owned by the company. And this is really important. The other thing I just want to talk about a little bit, and I'm not an IP attorney specifically. I don't do SBIR grant related work, but my understanding is if you asked an IP attorney, they would recommend that you file for a provisional patent before you file for your SBIR grant to ensure that nothing in your filing can disrupt your ability to patent the IP that you want to patent. This actually touches into some of the IP issues that we just talked about, using the founder IP assignment agreement to ensure the company owns all pre-formation and future IP. I just want to beat that down because that is extremely important. People miss that all the time, and it disrupts their future fundraising ability because investors, they will diligence your company in detail. And this is just one thing that comes up all the time, where the company failed to get a founder or somebody else that was material to the IP development to assign their IP to the company. And then it leaves a huge hole on the ownership, the chain of ownership. And that means that the investor might ask for a reduction in the purchase price or the pre-money valuation. They might ask for an indemnity, or they might just not invest at all. And that, or your alternative would be to go and rehash that relationship with that ex-founder to get them to assign the IP to the company. And usually that comes with a check that gets made. So you really want to avoid that. I will skip to the next slide because I feel like we're running a little bit behind on time. We talked a little bit about the tax implications of the C Corp versus the LLC. The one thing I want to highlight now is about qualified small business stuff. If you're not familiar with QSBS, this is something that you should look up later today or sometime tomorrow when you have some time. QSBS says that from a federal tax perspective, if certain conditions are met, the sale of stock in a qualified small business will be exempt from federal tax for up to $15 million or 10 times your adjusted basis. This is a huge deal because that means that, let's say you own 100% of the company, you meet the criteria, which is that you've held it for a certain period of time, 3 to 5 years, 5 years being you can offset 100% of that exclusion amount. That means that if you sell for $15 million, that entire thing is not subject to federal income tax. That's a huge deal. Unfortunately, we're in California, and if you're a California resident, that means that you will still pay state income tax on that. Some other states do follow the federal rules, but it's really important, and it has a huge benefit. And recently, I think it was 6 months ago in July of 2025, there was an update to the tax code, which says that now you can get up to 50% of that exclusion amount, so 7.5 million if you sell within 3 years, and then 75% of that, which is 12.5, if you sell in 4 years, and then the full 15 million if you sell in year 5. I will just mention one thing, that sometimes people will do what's called an LLC conversion, which is where they initially form the LLC and then they convert that LLC into a C corporation to get a better tax basis for qualified small business stock. This is because you get what's called 10 times your adjusted basis on your qualified small business stock. I'm not going to go into details about this. I just wanted to mention it because it is a tax planning strategy that is really beneficial. And so it's really ties around the LLC conversion. If you're a first-time founder, I generally don't recommend going with that strategy. If this is your second time around, third time around, it's a viable strategy. And even if you're a first-time founder and you have and you want to follow that, I would highly recommend getting counsel involved just to make sure that all of the documentation is done correctly. We talked about the taxation. We talked a little bit about qualified small business stock, and these are the specific requirements. Okay. I think I've got just a few more minutes here. So there's a few more slides on this stuff about the difference between California and Delaware law, and I'm not going to go into that because I don't have enough time. But what I want to touch on is using online services like Striped Atlas. So you can use that, and it's actually a great resource for forming your entity. One question that people have is, why would they use a law firm like Pillsbury as opposed to just going with Striped to form their entity? My answer to that is, if you're really cost sensitive, you should just form with Striped. If you're looking for somebody to be an advisor, to being a partner with you, to help you grow your company and workshop issues and help you avoid the problems that people face when they're forming an entity, when they're growing their company, when they're raising funds, that's when you want to engage a law firm to advise you, because the value that you're getting there is that you have this outside general counsel that advises hundreds of other companies, that actually sits on both sides of a transaction, right? Like a guy like me, I advise venture capitalists on their investments in companies. I also advise companies when they're being invested in by venture capitalists. And so I know the arguments and the things that people want and how to negotiate those kind of things and the pitfalls that you want to avoid. It's the same thing with other issues too. That's when you want to engage the counsel. But if you're simply like, okay, I'm just going to form this entity and then work out everything on my own, then Striped Atlas is a great resource. The other resource is out of USD called the Entrepreneur Clinic. They will advise and help with these formations in a really cost-effective way as well. Okay, I'll open it up to questions.
Actually, Kit, we're gonna move on to OmniSync. Thank you. And if you can stick around for about 10 minutes, we're gonna have an open forum Q&A for everyone, all the speakers. Okay, sounds good. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Good stuff, Kit. So next up, we're going to switch over to OmniSync. That's going to tell us about their product, Turbo Innovate, which is a really cool product. We've used it for the last 6 years through the Brink. And with us is Alvaro Ortiz, I believe.
It is a pleasure to be a part of this again. Thanks for inviting me. So, hello, team. You can actually call me Al, but I'm going to be representing OmniSync, and I'm going to be talking about our platform called Turbo Innovate. So just a little bit of a historical background. My CEO, Rupak Doshi, and my CTO, Norman, they had gone separate ways after doing their postdoc at UC San Diego. And after spending some time working themselves, they wanted to kind of come back and work on some ideas they had at the time, I guess. As they were applying for an SBIR, they thought that the process wasn't as easy as it should have been. And so it kind of spun up this idea of like, what if there was a better way of getting through this process? And what if that involved using software? So our first iteration of a software solution at the time was called Turbo SBIR because we were bouncing off the idea that through TurboTax like software, anybody and everybody across the United States can have a much easier time applying for SBIRs to get the funding they need to build and to develop the amazing technologies that they're working on. So the idea was that my team would look through these solicitations as they come out by the agencies. They would break it down so that you can have a much easier time getting through the writing process, getting through the administrative sections, building out the budgets in a way that's going to allow you to get the funding by these particular agencies. And so, and because it's a much easier process, it's also going to allow you to apply to multiple SBIRs. And as somebody who's been really successful in the space, the more SBIRs that you apply to, the more funding that you can get. At some point, people at the United States Air Force actually reached out to us and encouraged us to apply for an SBIR. So we started at a phase 1 to the AFRIX program. We were awarded the funding. We built out the tech that was required on that phase 1. We've advanced to the phase 2. We built a tech that we proposed to them on that phase 2. And then we were actually able to get to a phase 3, which not a lot of companies can do so. And we've been able to get to multiple phase 3s across multiple agencies. So the United States Air Force, the Department of Energy, the National Institute of Health, and recently NASA. And so we know that SBIRs are a really good way to get the funding you need, not lose any kind of equity for your company. And it's just a no-brainer to do this kind of work as you build out your technologies and innovations. But we kind of addressed it early in the presentations that the program is sort of going in limbo. So what other things can you do on our platform besides just looking and applying for SBIRs? And there's also, I did want to touch that we're not just a software solution. We do have a team of experts that can work with you, and as they understand the technology and what you're trying to do with your company, really help craft that story into your proposals so that you can put the best ones, grants across all the different agencies that you qualify for, right? And we have that unique experience of being really successful across multiple agencies ourselves. So, what Rupak is telling you to do for your proposal, that would be some really good advice to, take should you want our assistance and help you with the program, when it comes back around. So also a quick notice, for people who are actually working with Brink, you can get a full month of access to our platform. And I really encourage you to kind of connect with Stefan after the program so he can kind of get you up to speed on how to go through that process so that you can begin doing some of the interesting things that I'll be showing you in the next couple of slides. And of course, for people who are maybe not yet ready to work with the team at Brink, feel free to try out some of the capabilities that we have to offer by going to this link on those slides. So besides the SBIR stuff, one of the ways that we think entrepreneurs and startups can really benefit from our platform is the idea of like market research. Who else or what else is happening in this space that I'm trying to be a part of? So here you can kind of see that I've created this project centered around PFAS water removal. If, for instance, I was somebody that was working on this type of technology, I'd be able to go into the platform, create a project. I made this project on PFAS water. And the idea is that based on a lot of the data that we're constantly collecting, you'll be able to scroll down this page, and I'll try to do a live demonstration if I have some time towards the end to kind of see what kind of insights we're able to provide you from a lot of the data we're collecting across industry, academia, and government. But let's just say you wanted to dive into our raw data, right? Under the advanced search, this is where you're able to just search to specific databases just to kind of give you a sense of what's kind of happening. So as you're working on SBIRs, you might also just want to better understand who your competitors might be in the space. So under the industry section, specifically the companies, this is where you can kind of, based on your specific project description and maybe some additional filters you want to add to kind of slice and dice the data that's most relevant to you, you can kind of get a sense of who might be working in that space that you should know or keep track of, right? These were some of the results that I was shown based on me adding a filter for companies that received pre-seed funding in the last couple of years. And as I click into NanoPureX, you can kind of get a little profile of this company. I'm able to see how much money they may have raised. And then as you scroll down that page, you can kind of see who is a part of that specific company or organization. We do have a way to get their emails in case you wanted to potentially partner with them, which could be a way to build some of the technology you're working on. And if they're on LinkedIn, our platform has an integration so that you can click on the buttons and connect with them on LinkedIn if you prefer that type of outreach. And aside from, maybe you don't have a lot of time to kind of go through all our raw data, we do have a way to give, to summarize a lot of that information into certain types of reports, right? Tech scouting, commercial assessment, market size reports, competitive landscaping, right? If you're in the life sciences, we do have a lot of clinical trial data, so you can do clinical insight reports or drug landscape reports. And then something else we've kind of been building into the platform recently is agents, so that you don't always have to be logged in to go through a lot of the information we are presenting to you. So you can set up an agent if you're looking for ways to kind of find funding opportunities from the federal governments. And it's not just SBIRs, it could be other types of federal grants and contract mechanisms. And down here, you can kind of see it, but we have an agent that you can set up to track some of your competitors in the space, see what's up, what they're up to, any specific recent news that they may be putting out. You can also, again, just reiterating that I encourage everybody who's working with Brink to get access to that 1 month so you can kind of do a lot of this stuff. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I think I have a few minutes to actually go to the platform itself and give you a live demonstration. Can everybody see my screen okay?
We can see it.
Perfect. So again, based on the exact same project I had previously set up, if I wanted to get a better sense of what's happening on the market based on this PFAS water removal idea that I might be working on, I can set up that project. And as I scroll down this page, I'm going to be shown into types of data points that I can kind of use to take into consideration as I work on this idea or my company. So we come up with these recommendations of where you can potentially head to based on this idea you're working on, where my idea that I'm working on lies in comparison to all these other companies that are happening in the space. What does it look like to potentially patent this idea that I'm working on? And we do have a patent database that you can use as you work towards protecting your own IP as part of the process that I'll show you. What does funding look like in this space? We're able to create this 10-year window of where funding has flown to this particular area through both private and government style funding. We make what's the likelihood of getting some funding in this area? What are some potential investors or strategic partnerships I could form? What's the government likelihood of getting funding in this space? And then sort of a little breakdown of a lot of the different agencies that have provided some type of funding for PFAS removal. Again, recommendations of types of opportunities to potentially target, a breakdown of what the market looks like in this area. And of course, where is this innovation happening? This is a domestic view, but we do actually have a lot of international data that you can use, again, because we know that innovation is not just happening in the US. And just to kind of give you a quick run through of all the different types of data sets that exist on our platform, under the advanced search, you can just go through companies. Sometimes you might be at the point where you want to run pilots with strategic companies, right? So this is another way that we've seen startups use our databases to find companies that are of specific capabilities that they need. so they can reach out and, connect with them either through those emails capabilities that we've built into the platform, or if they exist on LinkedIn, maybe some people prefer connecting that way to start up conversations on what a potential pilot could look like as you work on SBIRs and other things, other areas of your company. If a specific company does have some type of funding, you'll actually be able to kind of see it. And if you want to look at specifically at the opportunity, again, it exists in a platform, and you can kind of see that that company actually received SBIRs in the past. As part of the SBIR process that you might be following through, it's definitely going to be a good idea to kind of see what companies have been awarded SBIRs in the past. And so we actually have that as one of our databases. Under the federal government, the innovation awards exist. This is where you can kind of get a sense of what companies have been receiving fundings, what specific agencies they've been receiving the funding from. And this is also a great way to potentially find new opportunities that you might not be thinking of if the EPA was, providing funding in your area that you don't typically think about. I know that somebody was maybe potentially working on like ed technologies here. Somebody had a questions about that. We've helped ed tech companies apply to the U.S. Department of Agriculture because they do have a section that allows that kind of innovation to potentially receive funding from, right? So this is a great way to just do a little bit of background market research as you kind of go about working on your SBIR, because one of the ways that these program managers think about the program is who have you funded in the past, and how is your specific innovation or approach sufficiently different enough and unique enough that it would justify us giving you, additional funding so you can pursue that technology or innovation you're working on. If you are looking for ways, for other opportunities outside the SBIRs, this funding opportunities engine exists so you can kind of see what's out there. We give you when the specific opportunity closes. And if you want to learn more about it, we give you the link to specifically to that source. And again, let's just say you don't have a lot of time to really dive deep into the raw data. Maybe that's where you'll benefit from some of the report types that we offer. So under those commercialization reports, again, you're welcome to come in. Maybe you want to include additional information about the work that you're trying to do. You can hit generate that report. It'll take a couple of minutes, but you're going to be able to kind of quickly understand what's kind of happening in the PFAS water space to help you, with your strategies of building your technology, your company, and what have you. And under this reports and agent space as well, we have those reports or SBIR applications that my team will always update based on a release by a lot of these participating agencies. And so we hope that as soon as this program comes back on, the team is going to review all these different solicitations, update our workflows so that it's compliant for that particular agency. Any questions on the platform itself?
Thanks, Alvaro. I think we're going to have a little Q&A broadly. Jonathan, did you have something to add?
Yeah,
box.
thank you. I'll grab my little box here. Yeah, as he mentioned, you want a free 30-day trial, email me. It's jirwin@sandiego.edu. I'm kind of the conduit between us and Turbo Innovate, OmniSync, which is also a Brink company too from back in the day. So email me.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a very effective platform. It's a great way to optimize your time and refine your research. It's worked with hundreds of our customers or of our clients at the Brink. So another advantage to being affiliated with the program. So we have Kit Ryan online. Alvaro is still online, I believe, if you have Turbo Innovate questions. And then Martin, do you want to come up and answer general SBIR questions? And Jason, will you come up and join too, if you have questions for any of us?
Actually, I've got one for Kit. Kit, I'm not 100% sure, but I think my understanding was to apply for an SBIR, it isn't necessary, it isn't a requirement to have a formal corporate structure to receive the award, I believe then it is required. Martin or Kit might have more context, and there might be another layer where even if what I'm saying is true, maybe there's some optics with agencies where they want you to, it would depend agency to agency, and you can just reach out to the agency program manager and ask them, you got to hit up the program managers, and some will talk to you, some won't. A phone call is way better than email, but LinkedIn, whatever, try it. But you would just ask them, hey, we're going to form an entity or form a corporate structure. How would you view that? Does that help us or hurt us, or it doesn't matter? Anyway, I'll let Kit or Martin follow up with if I'm true or not, because otherwise it's a pain in the butt to form entities that you end up trashing.
Okay.
So my experience has always been that you have created an entity as part of submitting your application. But I don't know definitively whether they'd say, I'll give you that latitude to say, okay, you can form it once if we give the grant. I would have thought they'd actually require it as a requirement. Do you have any opinion?
I think so too, because I thought we have to go to register with like the small business association. They need some EIN, right? Some that's my assumption. I've always done it that way. I have also started companies and shut them down within a year because we didn't raise any money, right? So, but I don't know definitively. I've always done it the same way.
Yeah. So I would say it's prudent to actually form the entity.
Yeah, Kit, we'll put you on the spot if you're still there. I mean, it's always comes down to limiting your liability. So if you're going to the effort to go ahead and apply for an SBIR loan, now's the time to incorporate. So you may as well do it at the same time. Other questions? Oh, where's the box? Jacques. Thanks.
So as scientists, we know there's a lot of tools that are fancy and pretty expensive. How do you deal with, to just achieve your minimal viable product, having diagnostics requiring tools that are going to exceed the cost of perhaps your first grant amount?
So you submit a budget proposal, and having an aspect where you have that item. Now, if it's a really expensive item, then I would have thought that typically you'd be more likely to source it through access in a core facility or something like that. So there's more than one way to achieve these things, and so but that's up to you to figure that out.
Yeah, I can add to that too. So, yeah, right. HPLC is expensive. MS is expensive. I can't put down $100,000, a third of my SBIR or whatever on these things. This is where access to university facilities come in huge play. I was not a graduate student here at UCSD, but my company was down here at UCSD. I went to an undergrad here, hit up some people, kind of use the core facilities. Everybody's like, yeah, let's go do that. If you have cell lines, you got a store, you can biobank them here at UCSD. The price just went up though. But anyways, so yeah, core facilities, knowing people at university. I went to SDSU, SDSU to use their mass spec facility there. You got to get in where you get in, but you can't afford any of that instrumentation, and putting large amount of CapEx on a phase one is a do not do. It's not a make sense.
So on campus, we have several of these centers, as I mentioned earlier to the slides, and there's a program called AIM that I highly recommend that is coming out of our office, Office of Innovation and Commercialization, and provides funding for prototyping. It's in the upward of $50,000. The application is once a year. The next cycle will probably begin right after, probably I would say August or September. But it's a once a year, and it's been very successful in helping. Now, other programs on campus may also have, if you go to IGE, if you're a medtech device, they may also have a little bit of funding, especially if you go to stage 2. So it really depends on what you're doing. There might be resources you could leverage on campus.
Thanks. Yeah, the very first thing you do with a large line item is not submit on your SBIR, but start asking around the universities, because we have great maker spaces and great prototyping, and there are a number of programs. You had a question. Grab the box.
Hi, so you've mentioned a couple times in different contexts the idea of, UCSD affiliation or whatever kind of university affiliation being helpful, but I guess I'm looking for some more clarification on kind of the definition of affiliation. Does it mean your IP is directly licensed from the university? Does it mean, I graduated or I worked for the university and then now I'm going off on my own entity, but building off of the work that I did? If you can go into some more detail there, that would be really helpful.
Typically something like a letter of support. So a collaboration, it doesn't have to be your professor, but by reaching out to an academic lab who have specialized capabilities that are central, and to be able to get a letter of support that they're supporting you and that they would be more than happy to work with you. Maybe they get some of the financial support as well out of the SBIR. But ultimately, it's that relationship and access to them is the document that you would be looking for.
Yeah, I can. So for me, I mean, I was a graduate student that spun out, but this letter of support was from a professor that was like, I know the technology. Jason's a reasonable person. I am willing to help and put in, and my lab has, some equipment that they can use if they need it. And something like that is like, oh, okay, cool, stamp of approval.
Yeah, it's pretty common misnomer that you have to be a professor in the lab to spin out technology that gets SBIR or NSF funding. That's not the case. I've served as industry mentor for creative entrepreneurs who've asked me for the same seal of approval. You don't have to be a professor, just an affiliation, and that can be through pretty much anyone in the university.
And ultimately, in the submission, what you're doing is you're basically presenting a case that you have access to the necessary capabilities to execute, and that is your background, your experience, your publications, the quality of the science that you're presenting, and then sort of the resources that you're accessing, whether that's a core facility, access to a key lab, is the whole point. So you can do it, and your application is saying you do it.
Yeah, and keep in mind, it's all about risk mitigation, right? So if you surround yourself with smart people in the area of expertise that you're applying in, that shows that you're serious and moving forward, and you've mitigated some risks, and you have people that can point out more risks that you're unaware of.
And one more comment on this is, if you are a UCSD researcher, grad student, or even from a lab or professor, once you're ready to spin out something from your lab, you have to go through the disclosure process. So that's through my office, and we have amazing staff that will help you get through the process of filing a patent and then getting to the process of help you set up a company. So we have legal expertise as well you could leverage from our office.
There's a section in the SBIR that's facilities and use and management or something like that. So I came back to San Diego, didn't have a too huge affiliation with UCSD. What did I have to write in there? We needed NMR. That's like $1 million machine. New Mega Labs is located on Sorrento Valley. It's $50 a sample, guys. Done, right? Then I was like, I'm going to have access to the core facilities at UCSD. You just write that in there, and everybody's like, yeah, okay, that's cool. He knows what to do. So there's stuff around here that you can just pay to play, and that's what you'd mitigate that risk. They can do it, and that's it.
We've got a question from the chat. I think, Kit, this one's for you probably, but anybody can answer. For software companies in particular, what are the IP considerations when you're applying for an SBIR or just in general?
Yeah, I can jump on that one. I think the most important consideration is ensuring that everyone who has touched the IP of the company has assigned that IP to the company itself. That should be done. Ideally, every employee and consultant, every founder should sign an agreement that does that. That really, from my perspective, is a non-negotiable. The other thing I think is important is that if you're planning on filing for a patent, I would encourage you to speak to an IP attorney to consider whether you should file for a provisional patent before your SBIR grant or modify the language that you put into your SBIR filing. to avoid preventing yourself from being able to patent that information later on.
Provisional patents are cheap, guys. Small entities. I would always do the provisional patent right before. You can basically take the SBIR and that, as you wrote it, and submit that as a provisional patent. You don't need claims and stuff. I mean, I bet the lawyers would probably tell me slightly different, but it just puts a priority date in there. And then you can go say now factually that you have, your patent is pending and on the way. It's like $50 or something like that. And you just do it.
Yeah, it does give you a timestamp, which is very important. And you don't necessarily have to put in that many claims, and it is inexpensive. But the one thing I'll say about provisional patents is you are on the clock. You have 12 months to file your full patent.
So when it comes to patents, my question is around kind of a technique that our lab uses. And it's a very standard chemical method from the 80s. Which if it's a method in a chemistry book that is shown to work over and over and over again, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how could that be applied to a patent? Or is the patent itself that method is applied to something entirely new? If that makes sense.
Kit, you want to take that?
Yeah, if my IP attorney was on here, he would say that you can patent technical solutions to technical problems. And so if you can find something in what you're providing that is technical in nature, then that can be patented.
And we have attorneys that you could talk to on our campus as well, through the Brink as well. So it's always good to have this conversation with IP attorney early on.
Yeah, we have free office hours you can sign up for with an IP attorney. So that's the next step.
You have no more questions, but thank you. Thank you, everyone. I want to thank our speakers and thank you for being here.
Thank you all. And we kick off on Monday, the 9th. So please sign up and join us. Thanks, Jacques.